We read the Tochacha. So the Baal HaTurim, who's a commentator, always points out certain things which are amazing. It gives you a full understanding on many things. He mentions that in the Tochacha, there are 98 curses. Tochacha, that's the curses, that if the Jews go and they fail, God forbid, Hashem will bring curses upon them. The name of Hashem is mentioned in Tochacha 26 times in the Tochacha. In the Shemoneh Esrei, the name of Hashem is mentioned 26 times. So he explains why, when they authored the Shemoneh Esrei, they included in the Shemoneh Esrei 26 times the name of Hashem should be mentioned, because the concept of the Amidah is what? Is Midas HaRachamim. It's to evoke God's mercy upon us. So, and what's the Tochacha? God forbid. It's the Midas HaDin, statute of justice. So to counter the 26, which you mentioned Tochacha, we have the 26 of the Shemoneh Esrei, which counters the 26, which quells the prosecution, that we should have Midas HaRachamim. That's the Baal HaTurim. That's the first thing he says. Then he says, the words Yakcha Hashem, Hashem should smite you, it's mentioned 4 times. 4 times. Why is the Yakcha Hashem mentioned 4 times? Because the Tocha has relevance to the Dalud Goyus. We have the 4 exiles. We have Bavel, we have Parsamodai, we have Yavon, we have the Greek, and we have the Edomite exile. So the curses that are stated in the Torah have relevance to all 4 exiles. That's why Yakcha Hashem is mentioned 4 times. Yakcha Hashem, which is interesting. Now, the Gemara tells us in Yuma who authored the Shemoneh Esrei. The Anshe Knesset Agdola. The men of the High Assembly authored the Shemoneh Esrei. When did they author it? At the beginning of Baal HaTurim, when the Jews returned from Bavel, they authored the Shemoneh Esrei, the Amidah, meaning the language till Baal HaTurim, till they authored this uniform text. Everybody would say it, use his own expression. He would supplicate Hashem in his own way. Of course, it had to have a certain format. But the requests, the numbers of requests, everyone had his own number and his own way of expressing it. The Rambam explains why. Because before we went to Bavel, the language of the Jew was pure Hebrew. Lashon HaKodesh. When you speak to Hashem, you speak to him in his language, which is Lashon HaKodesh. When they came back from Bavel, the Hebrew wasn't as pure any longer because they were exposed to the Greek, to the Babylonians, to the Persians. So the Hebrew was no longer pure Hebrew. It was interspersed with other language, with Babylonian, with Persian. It became a jargon. And when you speak to Hashem, you have to speak in pure Hebrew. So the Anshe Knesset Agdola, they authored a text, a uniform text, with pure Hebrew. But the Gemara tells us in Yuma, among the Anshe Knesset Agdola, common Nevim Hoyabinaim. There were a number of prophets among them. So Rav Chaim Volozhin and the Nefesh HaChaim asks, I mean, we're talking about the Anshe Knesset Agdola. We're talking people like Mordechai. Mordechai was a member of Mordechai, the story of Purim. He was a member of the Anshe Knesset Agdola. I mean, if you have people of this dimension to author a text, a uniform text, who are experts in Hebrew, what do we need Nevi'im? What do we need prophets? There should be prophets among them. That's the question which is asked by Rav Chaim Volozhin. He explains that when a prophet knows, even the greatest Torah sage doesn't know. Why? Because since he's in contact with Hashem, Hashem reveals to him certain realities which you can only know only if God reveals it to you. The Navi has an understanding of what's going to happen till the end of time. So the language and the words that they chose were words that will address every conceivable problem from then till the end of time, to address that problem, to evoke Midas HaRachamim. That's why you needed Kam Nevim Hoyabinaim. The Nevim were Chagei Zechari Malachi. They were known as the last prophets. They were part of this this panel, this group who authored the Amida. So we're talking about the Shemoneh Esrei is not only for the moment, it's not only for the first millennia, the second millennia, it's still Bias Mashiach. That any conceivable need which Klal Yisrael has, the words that they chose would activate forces which will bring Rachmim on Klal Yisrael. That's Rav Kalatsky. So now with the Baal HaTurim, it's very good. The 26 times the Shem Hashem is mentioned in the Tochacha. You have the Amida, which mentions the Shem Hashem 26 times. The Tocha is Midas HaDin. That's the attribute of justice. The Tefillah, when we supplicate Hashem with 26 times we mention Hashem's name, that quells the prosecution, that allows Midas HaRachamim to come upon us. This is what happens. Okay? And then it says, Yakha Hashem, Hashem will smite you. It says it 4 times in the Tocha, to say that the Tocha has relevance not only to them, but to all Dalet Golus. That the 4 exiles that we're in, every one of them, we have relevance, God forbid, that would be subject to the Tocha. As a result of this, it's with Rav Kalatsky said in the Nevi'im, when they authored the Shemoneh Esrei with the 26 names of Hashem to count at the Tocha, and it was addressing not only the second millennium, third, till the end of time, through the Edomite exile. Therefore, you need to come to Vimay name, because the Yakha Hashem, the Tocha has relevance to all the exiles. So if it has relevance to all the exiles, what do you need? You need the Amida of 26 times the name of Hashem mentioned to counter that. But how do you know they were then? How do you know exactly how to address, how to supplicate Hashem to quell the prosecution? The answer is come to Vimay name. As Rav Kalatsky, there were a number of prophets that they were able to foresee that any conceivable problem till the end of time, to use certain words or certain phraseology, which would activate the forces which were necessary to evoke the Rachmim to quell the Midas HaDin. Today you stand together Lifnei Hashem before Hashem, your God, Roshechem, Shiftechem, the leaders of the tribes, Ziknechem, the elders, Shotrechem, the law enforcers, Kol Yisrael, every Jew. So Rashi explains, Atem Tzabayom, Lamid Shekintzem Moshe Lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu B'Yom Moso, Lachlis Bris. Moshe assembled all the Jews, every segment of the population, on that day. It was the last day of his life, to bring them into this covenant. This covenant we're going to speak about is Arevus, that every Jew, we're speaking about communal responsibility, that every Jew is responsible to the other Jew. Roshechem, Shiftechem, Roshechem, the Shiftechem, the leaders of the tribes, Ziknechem, Shotrechem, Achoshem, Choshem, Kogan. He speaks about, first we speak about the people of greater distinction. Ziknechem, Shotrechem, Kol Yisrael. So over here, the Or Chaim HaKodesh explains that every person has his own sphere of influence. The Gemara tells us in Shavuos that Kol Mishesh B'Yodo Limchos Ve'eino Mocher. The person has the ability to intervene and intercede to prevent something wrong from coming about, and he does not. He carries the liability of the wrong that happened, because he could have made a difference that it should not happen. So we speak about everybody, and this is based on the concept of Arevus. Every Jew is responsible for every other Jew. If you could have made a difference and you did not make the difference, you're held accountable for not making the difference. But everybody has a sphere of influence. You have the leaders. The leaders are responsible for what? The Klal Yisrael, for the communities. And then you have the elders, Talmidei Chacham, they have their degree of influence. And then you have the law enforcers. Then you have each person regarding his own family, the head of the household. If something doesn't go right in the family, he sees something, he has to what? He has to say something. He has to intervene to perfect it. And if he doesn't, he's held accountable for the shortcomings of the family. This is the understanding. So therefore, we're speaking about, first we speak about the leadership, then we speak about the elders, we speak about the law enforcement, then we speak about every individual, each person. And then it continues. Tapchem, the sheichem, the young children, the women, gercha ger mechnecho. These are people who have the least degree of influence. They're converts in your communities. From the wood choppers to the water carriers. And what is this all about? Why is he assembling them? Hashem also to enter into the covenant of Hashem and into his oath. Hashem Kecho, which God is entering in with you today. What does he use the term over? You pass over regarding the covenant. Okay, lover bris derech havora. Kacho ikosi brisas osi mechitza mikana bekan. When a person would enter the covenant, they would make a partition 2 sides, and when you walk through the partition, it's like you're entering, going from one level to the other. We find that bris bein absorim, the covenant between the parts. What it says, the fire went between the parts. That was the Shechina, where Hashem entered into the covenant with Avraham Avinu. V'yavru bein besorov. Over here, there's a Baal HaTurim. If you look in the Baal HaTurim, on Kolish Yisrael, he says, "V'somach le v'tapchem," and it juxtaposes the tapchem means the small children. Lo mashi Yisrael be'eni haroshim lenalom ladricham ketapo. Now, very often people, they're busy with their own lives. A person who enters into a level of responsibility, you have to treat each person in the community who you're responsible as if it's your own child. Not only it's your own child, just as a taf is a child who can't care for himself. That's the level, the degree of responsibility you have to attend to every nuance of need that person needs. That's the responsibility of leadership. It's not leadership means, you're being glorified, your position of leadership. It carries tremendous responsibility, as we just said, because if they fail under your watch, you're held accountable for their failing. Parashim used to say the name of the Alta Slabotka. In the first portion of the Kriya Shema, we say, Vishinantum Levonecha. You must teach your children Torah. So the Gemara tells us, Bonecha Elu Tamidecha. Vishinantum Levonecha, you must teach your children, it means your students. So the Alta Slabotka asks, if Shinantum Levonecha means you must teach your students, so why doesn't Torah say, Vishinantum Letamidecha? It should say, teach your students. Why does it say, Levonecha? So we used to say in the name of the Alta Slabotka that just as a person, when it comes to his child, he leaves no stone unturned. And as much as the child doesn't want, the father continues until he convinces the child to get involved in the study of Torah. Identically, when you teach another person's child, that child should be no less than your own son. That has to be the level of relationship between a teacher, a rebbe, and a talmid. It should no be different than Bonecha. That's what it's saying over here. Kol Yisrael, the leadership, they have to deal with Klal Yisrael as if it's the young children, that they're not capable of doing the many things they can't do on their own. And therefore, you carry that level of responsibility to address whatever their needs are. And you're in that position of leadership exactly for that reason. It's not to be glorified, to be honored, but rather to attend to whatever the needs of the community may be. It's a story where Baron Kotler, if you ever read the book, Fire in His Soul, which was put out, was written by Amos Bunim, which was son of Irving Bunim. Irving Bunim was Rav Aharon's right-hand person from the time they came to the United States, building Lakewood Yeshiva in the Varatzola during the war, saving people from Europe, raising money to purchase lives from the Nazis to save them. So after his father passed away, his father was older, he would travel to Rav Aaron. So they once went to a person, I think it was in England, to raise money for the yeshiva, for Lakewood Yeshiva. And we talk about a very wealthy man. And Rav Aaron presents his request, and the man writes a check for $500, which was totally not appropriate. A person like Rav Aaron Kotler comes to you, and he understood who it was. I mean, how do you write a check for $500? So Amos Bulin was ready to really tell this person off. Now, you requested we should come and this and that. That's what you write. What you want to be on it, that Rav Aaron Kotler should come to your home, then you write this kind of check. Rav Aaron said he shouldn't say a word. Not say a word. Why shouldn't you say anything? Because this man, Hashem gave him a schus, he should be able to sort Torah. If you reprimand him, this may deter him from continuing supporting Torah. Therefore, don't say a word. So now, as being in a position of leadership, if you think about yourself, what is your reaction? Immediately, you react, you reprimand the person. But if you think about the other person, here I've come to give him an opportunity to do a mitzvah to support Torah. And by saying anything may actually discourage him from continuing, you keep quiet. Because me in a position of leadership, I have to relate to the person. It's not me, it's him. That's the concept. Where did Rav Aaron learn this from? I mean, not learn, he was a Torah giant. There was a story that when Rav Aaron fled from the Nazis, he was in Poland. It was a community called Kletsk. He was a yeshiva in Kletsk. He was a young man in Europe. And they had to make the train in the train station. And he and his students, they rushed to the train station before the Nazis came into Kletsk. And as he's in the train station, he realized that he left his tefillin behind. He left his talis and tefillin behind. He says to his students, he's going back for his talis and tefillin. So they said to him, they don't think it's such a good idea because here, at least he'll have safe passage to get out of the clutches of the Nazis. He goes back, he's putting his life in jeopardy. For whatever reason, he was adamant, he went back. He goes back, he finds his talis and tefillin. Now he has to seek a hiding place because the Nazis are hunting Jews. He goes to a farm, knocks on the door. Person about 6'6", 6'8" comes to the door. Blonde hair, wearing like farmer's overalls. And he says to him, and he sees he's a Jew. He sees Rav Aaron is a Jew. And he says, I need a hiding place. So he says, go into the barn. Go into the barn. So he goes into the barn, and that's where he sleeps, but he sleeps in the loft because he doesn't know what's going to happen. And he gets up early, and he puts on his talis and tefillin, Rav Aaron Kotler, and he davens in the corner, in the barn. After he finishes davening, he sees this goy, seemingly appalled, watching him pray. And he's like mesmerized by this. So after Rav Aaron Kotler takes off his talis and tefillin, he says to this non-Jew, he says, I see you were staring at me. Why were you so impressed, or what was the connection? So he started to cry, this guy. He says he remembers his grandfather used to wear what you're wearing. He used to wear the same prayer shawl, and he wore these leather straps and boxes on his head. So Rav Aaron realized he was a Jew, and he was totally assimilated. So Rav Aaron says to him, would you want to put on the tefillin? He says, yes. So Rav Aaron put on tefillin with him, maybe said the Shema with him, took it off, and that was it. Then Rav Aaron fled. Story's not over. A few months later, Rav Aaron has a dream. What's the dream? This person comes to Rav Aaron in a dream and says he was killed by the Nazis because somehow they did their homework, they found that he was a Jew, and they put him to death. And the reason why he has a share in the world to come is because he offered him the tefillin, he put on the tefillin. In the merit of the tefillin he put on, that's what has a share in the world to come. he wouldn't have put on the tefillin, he had no relevance to the world to come. So Baron's takeaway from that is, if a Jew does a mitzvah, you can't imagine what you're doing for that person. You expected more money. He gave you a smaller check. Doesn't make a difference. The emphasis, what is the person, in what degree is he a beneficiary? It's not what you don't get, it's what he receives. Therefore, Baron said to Amos Vuna, don't say a word. You're disappointed, doesn't make a difference. We're here to give opportunity. He has that, he's participating, leave it at that, don't do more than that. It's a phenomenal takeaway, and this is greatness. I mentioned quotes supposed to be Mishlei. When you overturn the Rishonim, they're not here anymore. I mean, when you do an audit on the Rishonim, the moment you do an audit on their record, they don't exist any longer. However, the house of Tzadikim remains standing. The Rishonim, when you do the audit, after the audit, the house of the Rosh doesn't stand any longer. But Beis Tzadikim Yavod. When God places his eyes and delves into the actions of the Rishonim, and he audits them and he evaluates them, they don't have a chance to exist. The Torah says God saw how the members of the great generation, great flood behaved. There was no remnant. Shenemar, God obliterated all that stood, all that existed was destroyed through the great flood. He went and he gazed upon the behavior of the Stomites. He overturned the cities, cosmic destruction. He did an audit on the Egyptians. Only one was left. The Babylonians, after 70 years being in exile, who was the last remnant, the last of Nebuchadnezzar's family? Vashti was a granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar. When she was killed, that was the last of the family. Shenemar, Vichrati, Lebovel, Shem, Sher, Nidvenechot. There's no grandson, there's no grandchild, great, there's no descendant. Akulamama David. And David in Tehillim says regarding this bit, God's relationship with dealing with these issues, Shem Noflu Poli Ovim. That's where the doers of evil had fallen. They were cast away, never to come back. They were cast into the oblivion. Al Yisrael, but the Jewish people, even when we fall, when we're punished, we're able to stand up. Do not rejoice. My enemy should not rejoice. When I fall, when the Jews fall, enemies, they rejoice. Don't rejoice. Because ultimately we rise again. As much as we fall, the Jew always rises. Supposed to be Hashem lo shanisi. In the history of existence, I've never smitten a nation where I had to repeat it again. Once God began punishing the nation was destroyed. But you, the sons of Yaakov, you were never consumed. You always survived regardless of how extreme the punishment was. We have in the parsha, my arrows were expended. All my arrows were expended. Although my arrows are expended, but they remain intact. What is it analogous to? You have an archer, he puts up a beam, and he practices by shooting the arrows into the beam. As many arrows as he has, when he shoots them to the beam, the arrows ultimately are going to be expended, but the beam stays intact. So as much as Hashem punishes us, we remain intact. We're not destroyed. The Jewish people, when suffering comes upon Jewish people throughout history, Ultimately, the suffering comes to an end, but the Jewish people remain. And they're not consumed. Meaning like this, unfortunately, we have casualties. What 6 million during the Holocaust. We have endless casualties. But ultimately, where are we today? We always rise. As much as we fall, we always rise. The Jewish people are guaranteed. Now the question is why? The moment he starts punishing the Rishonim, they go into oblivion. They disappear. But the house of the tzaddik, which is Beis Yaakov, Yamod, they remain eternally. Loman Nitzcha Parshas Zul Parshas Klobos. When the Jews heard 100 clothes minus 98. Alan, it's not slichas yet.
Oh.
When the Jews heard the 98 curses, they became like overwhelmed. They became like the blood, they lost the blood from their face. He immediately, Moshe called them and he started to appease them, to put them at ease. So he said to them, your behavior of the past, you deserve to be destroyed. And despite that, I did not destroy you. And we came to the idol, to the egel. This is the punchline. Why did they deserve to be annihilated? And the Jewish people have something which allows us to continue. When the goyim are punished, they bolt from Hashem and they don't mention the name of God. They become rebellious. They become upset with God. David Melch says, do we say this to Seder? Go to the door. You should pour out your wrath on the nations who don't know you. Al Yisrael, that's the punchline. When suffering comes upon them, they're subdued and they pray. They don't bolt. As David says in Tehillim, Tzara v'yogan himso. Tzara and angst I find. And what? But he says, B'shem Hashem ekro. But nevertheless, he calls the name of God. That's what actually gives you the guarantee, because through that you come to recognition, you become humbled. And when you become humbled and you realize that you have no entitlement, that's why you survive. The Goyim, the nation of the world, know when suffering comes upon them, they feel they're undeserving. Where does God have a right to punish them? And therefore, they're not humbled, they're not subdued, and they continue in their rebellious posture. Therefore, they're destroyed. Therefore, it says Hashem afflicts us to lift us up, that ultimately should be good for us at the end. The Yisurim is what guarantees your survival. Therefore, it says, now you stand only because the Jew has that quality that when he takes the bitter pill, he comes to recognition. It's not God, it's them. It's us. We failed. It's not God's failing, but it's our failing. Mark tells us Chagiga that poverty, this impoverishment for the Jewish people is like putting a red scarf on a white stallion. You have a white stallion, you put that red sash on it, it beautifies it. Poverty beautifies the Jewish people. The Jewish people always do best when they're in an impoverished state. When did the Jews start slipping and start going off the cliff? It's only through success, through material success. And as a result of that, The Yisurim, when we're stripped of all the so-called extras, amenities of life, and we realize it's not the way we think it is, we come to certain realizations, and that allows us to do tshuva. So now it's interesting. We're holding before Rosh Hashanah, and we speak about the exactness of the Yom HaDin, of God's justice. How does it, if the Jew sees it, how does he process that? If a Jew innately has the ability to be subdued and be humbled, he understands he's not perfect. As much as during the year we believe, due to our entitlement, we have a right to do many things, and we have a right to cross many lines. When push comes to shove, when we're already holding at the day of judgment, we come to the realization we're not as perfect as we thought we were throughout the year. As a result of that, the Jew does tshuva. The Jew approaches Rosh Hashanah as he should approach Rosh Hashanah. The Goyim, they're totally oblivious to this, because they don't have that sense. At Sinai, when we were offered the Torah, what did we say? We said Nasim Nishma. What did the nations of the world say? Worse than they said, we're not interested. It doesn't fit our lifestyle. If it doesn't fit our lifestyle, it's not for us. With us, there's nothing fitting our lifestyle. If that's your will, we submit. We submit to your will. So this innate characteristic, which we get really from Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu was the second most humble person who ever lived. Anochi Ofef Efer. So innately, the Jew has that characteristic. This is the Baishonim way of conscience. What is conscience? Conscience means that behaving differently is unacceptable. If God is the benefactor at every level, how could we be demanding? So sometimes we forget. We believe it's Kochi Yotzim Yodi. It's our power. We're the cause of our successes. But if you really think about it and you see it correctly, as much as we participate in the success, but the ultimate one who gives the success, who's the benefactor? Hashem. If that's the case, it's unconscionable to act as to behave as we behave. Therefore, when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, certain moments, our conscience, which we inherit, that characteristic from Avram Avinu and from the Avos, allows us to see it correctly. We see it through the right lens. The nations of the world, they don't have that. They don't have these characteristics. As a result of that, immediately, what do they say? Where do you have a right to do this to us? You know, we live in our ivory tower. How do you have a right to rattle our cages? They don't understand. If not for God, they wouldn't exist. But they have this block. And as a result of that, they bolt, and they bolt. Hashem punishes them until they go into a non-existent state.